What's up, folks? This is Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards. Have you ever fought an owlbear, battled a beholder, played a paladin? Maybe you've mastered the monk? Did you know all of these things that we love about D&D actually originated in the supplements for the original D&D white box? And that is what we're going to talk about today. Let's get into it. Before we get too far into this thing, if you enjoy the content today, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, as that is the only way to get this video out to more gamers like yourself so that they can have that same experience. If you're looking for a group of gamers to have a conversation with, maybe even play some games with, check out the Discord channel. There's a link in the description of this video. Lastly, if you want to support the channel financially, help offset some of the costs associated with doing what we do here, think about a membership. As low as $2 a month, you get a few perks, and you make it possible for us to keep doing what we do. With all that out of the way, on with the show. A few months ago, I covered in some detail the original edition of Dungeons & Dragons, the 3 little brown books in that iconic faux wood grain box. Later, a white box. That video was a labor of love, and I'm glad that the small number of you that watched it seemed to largely enjoy it. In those initial sets, we got to see a very different version of the game that most of us play today. What with the chainmail, combat defaults, D6s for universal damage and hit dice, and very small number of options, one might be forgiven for mistaking it for an unrelated parallel designed game of the time, and not the roots of the largest RPG in the history of the term. I know that I, even with 4 decades of gaming experience, having played with some of the old white box grognards myself, growing up not far from the famed Judges Guild, even I was surprised to see just how unfamiliar with those core rules I was. In fact, I had to learn Swords and Wizardry white box, read Finch's commentary on his choices there, and then go back to the original books to be able to better understand them. It was worth the extra work, as I did start to see the clear through line to many of the later editions of the game. The DNA was very much there, even if a bit hidden from the unfamiliar eye. Due to the slow performance, I held off on the promised follow-up video covering the supplemental materials of the old white box game. Truthfully, I shouldn't have, because the almost alien nature of those 3 little brown books is obliterated by the tidal wave of genre staples that would be introduced in the pages of the following 4 supplements, the first of which was Gygax's own Greyhawk supplement, known as Supplement Number 1. Released in 1975, not long after the birth of the game, the Greyhawk supplement would have been a crucial addition for any aspiring referee. Attributed to Gary Gygax and Rob Kuntz while bearing the title of Gary's Campaign World, which Kuntz co-DM'd with Gary, the Greyhawk supplement was not a setting book, but rather a collection of rules changes and additions the two were testing in their home games. This is a really interesting dive into the different design philosophies at the core of our game's history. Whereas the later Blackmoor supplement would reflect the game design ideas of Gygax's co-creator of D&D, Dave Arneson, Greyhawk reflected those ideas Gary had for the game. Gary, who with Jeff Perrin created Chainmail, the predecessor of D&D, was a master of finding ways to provide playable rules to a critical mass of gamers. He knew his audience because he was his audience. In Greyhawk, Gary gave us an incredible list of D&D tropes, staples that stand to this day, including but not limited to the Paladin, though part of the Fighting Man class here, the Thief, including their iconic list of skills and abilities, expanded ability score tables, previously these were largely just for experience adjustments, exceptional strength tables, variable hit dice, variable damage dice, half-elves as a playable race, iconic spells such as shield, magic missile, web, monster summoning, and the whole of the 7th to 9th level magic user spells, 7th level cleric spells, holy swords, vorpal swords, figurines of wondrous powers, the deck of many things, monsters such as storm giants, bugbears, beholders, owlbears, liches, ogre mages, were-rats, displacer beasts, and hellhounds, just to name some of his durable additions to the game in the Greyhawk supplement. Think about that for just a moment. This supplement of less than 75 pages completely changed the game in the form of meaningful attributes, iconic classes, iconic monsters, iconic spells, and iconic magical items. When you think of D&D in any form, it is hard not to think about something introduced in this supplement. As an example, the D&D Lego Castle set, presumably meant to display iconic D&D tropes, has a thief, a paladin, a beholder, a displacer beast, and an owlbear. These were all introduced in the Greyhawk supplement. This book, in a lot of ways, defined what D&D would become, the first step towards advanced Dungeons and Dragons. The second supplement, also released in 1975 and attributed to Dave Arneson, though I'm sure Tim Kask would have an opinion on that attribution, was titled Blackmoor. This is a brilliant look into the design philosophy of Dave Arneson, who had been the one to take Gygax's medieval fantasy skirmish game, Chainmail, and turned it into a hero-based dungeon crawl role-playing experience. Dave saw opportunities for play that others, even experienced gamers, missed. He looked at things very differently, and this is on full display in the Blackmoor supplement. Where Gygax's supplement was busy iteratively improving the way people were already playing the game, Arneson's Blackmoor supplement was adding hit locations, body part damage allocations, height adjustment tables for combat and underwater adventure rules, as well as a thorough list of diseases. He was taking the game in new directions. Unfortunately, this time, the crowd wasn't following. These new additions added tedium to the processes and slowed down the game considerably. That said, his addition of the Eastern-flavored monk, a subclass of the cleric here, and the assassin were fairly long-standing and somewhat well-received additions to the game. His list of new monsters seemed to focus on adding the word giant to every imaginable creature, sadly not the new and iconic list Gygax and Kuntz had added in the prior entry. Blackmoor also provides a fully detailed temple complex as an adventure site, still a fairly new concept at the time. The Temple of the Frog showing Dave's laborious efforts in dungeon design up close and personal. From looking at the two approaches, I am definitively saying that I would have loved to experience playing at Dave's table firsthand, with his detailed and simulationist game style, but I'd never want to run it. Dave was a one-off, and to try to emulate him as a referee would be folly. This was Gary's gift. He introduced ideas that we could use at our tables, not theoretical concepts that could not be practically applied, for the most part. Supplementary Rulebook 3 was Eldritch Wizardry, released in 1976 and attributed to Gary Gygax and Brian Bloom, one of the few writing credits Bloom would claim. Do you remember what I just said about Gygax for the most part giving us usable materials? Well, the psionic system here is one of the few that just didn't work, for me at least. This system is similar in many ways to the one later used in AD&D and then AD&D 2nd edition as well, which I also never was a huge fan of. That said, it's there with its psionic attacks and defensive forms in their full glory. Here, psionics is approached as a possible power for most classes, though the monk and druid were excluded. The discussion on how psionics manifested differently in different classes was interesting, but I could never imagine using the rules outside of possibly in the form of a big bad with mind bullets. Speaking of big bads, Eldritch Wizardry hits it out of the park with Kirin, Mind Flayers, Intellect Devourers, Orcus, and the Demogorgon. The book also makes the Druid, a monster from the Greyhawk supplement, a playable class, giving a full 7-level spell list to boot. Last but not least, the book gives us a wide array of artifacts, including but not limited to the Sword of Kaz, the Axe of the Dwarvish Lords, the Rod of 7 Parts, the Hand and Eye of Vecna, and the Orbs of Dragonkind. These are truly monumental additions to the game, with many a campaign and some TV shows focused on the very artifacts herein. Overall, Eldritch Wizardry wasn't as groundbreaking for rules as Greyhawk, but the ideas it introduced might have been even larger in their impact on the world-building aspect of things. The fourth and final major supplement to the original Dungeons & Dragons was Gods, Demi-Gods, and Heroes, penned by Rob Kuntz and James Ward. Released in 1976, this book, like the later Deities and Demigods, gave extensive stat blocks for the members of several of Earth's pantheons, covering gods and some heroes and beasts as well, of the Egyptians, Hindus, Greeks, Celts, Norse, Finns, Aztecs, Mayans, and Chinese. In the original prints, it also covered Howard's Hyborian Age heroes and Moorcock's Melnibonian heroes as well. Though sadly, these last two are omitted from the modern PDFs due to rights issues. The book also gives some nice examples of magical items from each of the pantheons, perhaps giving some treasure bait to tempt players to make a run at Thor in the hopes of grabbing Mjolnir. This book is very different from the others in the series, as while they mimicked the men in magic, monsters and treasure, and the underworld and wilderness format of the original box, giving value to each part of the game, Gods, Demi-Gods, and Heroes was positioned more as the ultimate carrot to provide reason to keep pursuing power once all your worldly foes were vanquished. By the fact that it was aped in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons with deities and demigods, and again with legends and lore in both Advanced Dungeons & Dragons and Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition, and to some degree in Menser's Immortals box, it seems a fair assumption that the concept was successful. As with many old school products, it wasn't that many of us would legitimately achieve the power required to tackle the subject matter. It was the often unfulfilled promise of toppling deities that appealed to many a teenage outcast seeking to exert their power on the world in some way, even if only imagined. And with that, we have reached the conclusion of the white box supplements. Now, the good and the bad. First, the good. Number 1, D&D with class. Remember, the original white box just had fighting men, magic users, and clerics. By the time you get to the end of all 4 of these books, you've added the thief, the paladin, the monk, the assassin, and the druid, more than doubling the options for players. Moreover, these classes played very different than those that were included in the original white box. They added a little bit more complexity as well as a whole lot of flavor. The classes here still see play today, largely except for the assassin, and even it is seen in some forms throughout the game. Added to that the tropes of the thief, paladin, monk, and druid are largely the same as they were back in the original form seen in these supplements, and you have an incredible advancement of the game. Number 2, meaner monsters. Adding owlbears, displacer beasts, and demogorgons, oh my! The iconic creatures that were added through these various supplements have become synonymous with the game, and when you think of D&D, you think of beholders and owlbears and displacer beasts, and these were all introduced in the supplements that we've talked about today. They add a lot of flavor to the game and, in a lot of ways, get it away from the nearly pure Tolkienian roots of the monster bases we had in the white box. Number 3, mechanically enhanced. Adding variable hit dice and damage, expanding the attribute charts, and adding more spells than you can shake a wand at, the mechanical enhancements added by the Dungeons & Dragons supplements to the original white box really made it like a precursor version of AD&D. In some ways, it might even be a little bit better than AD&D, as it still kept some of the simplicity even when you tacked on all of these additional items. Plus, you had a carte blanche to pick and choose which aspects you wanted to add and which ones you didn't, because they were all optional supplements at the time. Overall, the mechanical changes that were added in these books changed the game, and for the better. Now, the bad. Number 1, mind-melting psionics. These just seem out of place, they're very difficult to add to your game, and they just don't fit the tone of the rest of the game. It really feels like Gary was wanting to add some sci-fi to his peanut butter, and he just kind of lost his way along the path. I think that given a different tone for the rest of the game and a little bit more time in fine-tuning these rules, the psionic system might work fine. I know there are lots of people that used a very similar system when they were playing Dark Sun in 2nd edition, and I played a lot of Dark Sun in 2nd edition, and it worked fine as long as it wasn't a major focus of the game, but here it just feels very out of place. Number 2, a simulationist quagmire. This game is only slightly removed from its wargame roots at this point in the history of RPGs. And you see a lot of that in some of the advancements that Mr. Arneson wanted to add to the game. The hit locations, the body part hit points, and the height modifiers to attacks. The whole thing probably worked very well. I'm sure that Dave's math was spot on here. Unfortunately, it slows the game down to the point where it's just no longer fun, at least for me. So the simulationist aspects of this can drag the game down. Luckily, I don't think very many people use those parts of the rules anyways. Number 3, D&D's divorce. This is the big one for me. These supplements really sowed the seeds for the split between Gary and Dave. It was in their disagreement on philosophies and on workload distribution that the eventual departure of Dave from the game that he helped co-create started. With that said, I'm happy where the game ended up heading while it was still with TSR, but I still wonder what could have been if Gary and Dave had managed to keep their relationship on good terms and collaborate further, adding in very innovative ways to the system that we all know and love today. Oh, what could have been. Summary. While the white box was the roots of the game, it is only by these supplements to that work that the foundation for the rest of the future of the game was laid. The ideas here, while further refined in AD&D, are most of what we think of when we see D&D today. The concepts of variable hit dice and weapon damage may seem obvious now, but when introduced, they were revolutionary. To think, thieves, not rogues, paladins, monks, assassins, druids, and half-elves were all laid out right here. Largely, they remain true to their roots still today. Imagine D&D without bugbears, owlbears, beholders, and liches. I don't want to, but they all started right here. For all of its innovation, the core classes of 5th edition are the Barbarian, Bard, Cleric, Druid, Fighter, Monk, Paladin, Ranger, Rogue, Thief, Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard, Magic User. Of those 12, 7 were firmly established in the original game. 3 more would be added in AD&D, bringing a full 83% of the class list as having been conceived as part of Dave and Gary's game. It's fine to enjoy whatever edition or game that strikes your fancy, but you should be able to appreciate that much of what you love started in a meager collaboration of a couple of gamers from the Twin Cities and Lake Geneva. Look at those absolute legends. Keith Simone, Dangar the Mighty, Jook, Blue Rose Lion, Agile Monk, Bjorn, I Am Not Tim, and Mike the Hammer. Special thanks to Pralinor, Acine Dean, and Steve Grodzicki. And that's it. That's my take on Dave and Gary's game, Part 2, the supplements. What was your experience with these? Did you ever try them whenever they were originally out? Were you surprised by any of the things that you found out were introduced in these books? How many things do you see in these books that we talked about today that are your favorite parts of the game? Tell me about it in the comments, and until next time, this has been Justin with Books, Bricks, and Boards. Good gaming, and God bless.